climactic battle between the first and second in command at Evil Sky Pavilion has reached a fever pitch. The two fought fiercely all the way, finally resorting to their killing moves. Yan Rong flipped his right hand, leaving trails of afterimages where he stood. Shockingly, his 100 Tribulation Insight avatar also flickered into afterimages. He displayed the Grand Divine techniques, and returning to the Origin Sword technique, the sword's intent leaves no trace. The sword's intent leaves no trace means no trace, no shadow, no intent, no mark. The naked eye can no longer capture the sword intent around, reaching the ultimate void. With a slight perception, tens of thousands of sword forceful energies converged and shot out. Yan Rong, with his avatar, charged horizontally and straight through. Tens of thousands of sword forceful energies attacked along with the longevity sword. Yinghai seemed to have anticipated Yan Rong's move, gathering blade forceful energy around the jade blade, forming a strong defense. Great mysterious heavenly seal. With a bang sound, the two forces collided, and the vertical forceful energy ripples spread out, covering a kilometer radius. The trees affected by the ripples on the ground, when viewed from above, looked like trenches. Both avatars dissipated under the massive impact. Yinghai stepped back, and so did Yan Rong. The two hovered in midair, facing each other from a distance. Yinghai clenched the jade blade, picking it up from the little finger to the thumb in succession, with veins bulging on his arms. A slight tremor appeared on Yan Rong's little finger, but he quickly steadied it. You are much stronger than I imagined. Senior brother flatters me. You are not bad either. Junior brother, you are the first to force me to exert my full strength. Yinghai's tone became serious and solemn. Hopefully, I can satisfy senior brother. Yinghai's palm flattened, and the jade blade spun into the air. At that moment, the avatar appeared again. Yan Rong, unwilling to be outdone, also had his avatar appear. The sky filled with forceful energy had turned into a storm. In such a battle, who can contend? Luo still sat by the windowsill, only occasionally opening his eyes to look in the direction where the avatar appeared. Good thing those two troublemakers didn't come this way. He closed his eyes in relief and sank back into contemplating the heavenly writing. Sounds of the avatar colliding came intermittently, as if the entire cloud illuminating peak trembled with them. Siwuya, where is he? Due to the distance, Luo couldn't see Siwuya, but he was certain that Siwuya had come to 100 Leaves Lake with Yan Rong. So, where would he be watching the battle from? Enhanced cage bindings. 3 left. Everything is ready, just lacking time. Time flew, and another day passed. Luo opened his eyes and looked towards 100 Leaves Lake. The vast 100 Leaves Lake was a mess, with no trace of the two men in the sky. The cooldown time for the prop cards was still 5 hours. Elder Senior, Duan Musheng's voice came. It's truly an eye-opener. An eye-opener indeed. Luo walked out of the room with his hands behind his back and asked, what was the result? Although the two are closely matched in cultivation, after such a long battle, it often comes down to willpower and experience. In that regard, Yinghai is very likely to come out on top. However, Luo hasn't spent much time with them over the years, and perhaps Yan Rong has matured more over these years. Saying Yinghai could win might be premature. It's difficult to resolve, but the intensity of the battle wasn't as spectacular as the first 2 days. Luo nodded. They've been fighting for so long, they must be tired. Like running, the farther you go, the more exhausted you become. Let's go have a look. Duan Musheng responded eagerly. He had wanted to get a closer look earlier, but dared not. The battle had scaled down, and from a slight distance, it was hard to see clearly, while getting too close might risk detection by the underworld sex for great protectors. Now with the Elder Senior backing him, there was no such worry. Please, Elder Senior, board the boat. After saying that, Duan Musheng kicked a junior next to the steering wheel. The Elder Senior boarded the flying ship, which slowly ascended. I shall steer myself. Luo glanced at Duan Musheng without saying a word. With such an attitude and vision, he could probably only be a minor leader, not suited for greater things. But these matters were of no concern to him. The flying chariot departed from the foot of cloud illuminating peak, heading towards 100 Leaves Lake. Elder Senior, the speed is somewhat slow. Please bear with it. I'm going to speed up now. After hearing this, Luo raised his hand and said, there's no need. Duan Musheng puzzled. Why not? Why so many questions? You ask too much. Luo did not answer but continued to ask, Duan Musheng, how did you find out that the two would duel at cloud illuminating peak while piloting the flying chariot? Duan Musheng pondered. I found out while heading to Mount Tranquility. It was not easy to come by. If you can find out, so can others with intentions. Elder Senior, are you suggesting there might be others nearby? Duan Musheng quickly reduced his speed and steered the flying chariot towards the nearby jungle. Luo nodded. It's just a guess, but it's a very likely possibility. Duan Musheng looked around, and the surroundings became unusually quiet. Elder Senior's lesson is taken. I was foolish, making such a big scene. We've scared off the rats. As the flying chariot flew past Purple Mist Mountain, the air carried a faint sense of tension. Everyone was astounded. The immense trenches and the destructive power of the blade forceful energy and sword forceful energy left them in awe. Everywhere was a mess, and the sound of forceful energy collisions was getting closer. Up ahead is the cloud illuminating woodland. The flying chariot deliberately avoided the woodlands severed by the battle and appeared near the underworld sect flying chariot. In the sky, Yinghai. Yu Shanrong and Yinghai were both sent flying backward, flipping several times in midair before stabilizing their forms. They had been fighting for 3 days and nights, and continuing so many days while constantly deploying the 100 Tribulation Insight Avatar. The extent of their cultivation was terrifyingly evident. Duan Musheng, visibly excited, exclaimed, "Elder Senior, they seem to be faltering." Lu Zhou nodded slowly and spoke calmly, "No rush." Yu Yinghai generously praised, "What a returning to the origin sword technique." Yu Shanrong managed a weak smile. "The great mysterious heavenly seal is also impressive." Hua Chongyang silently watched this scene. Over these 3 days and nights, the two had not stopped boosting each other's morale, to the point he had become immune to it. After praising each other, they resumed their fierce battle. However, both appeared much weaker than before. Despite this, their combat was still beyond what other cultivators could match. The area of 100 Leaves Lake, spanning several miles, was destroyed, and even the nearly 100-meter-high Purple Mist Mountain was cracked. Near the cloud-illuminating woodland, 10 mountain peaks were completely sheared off. Along their path, the sword forceful energy severed all trees in its reach. Countless birds and beasts were indiscriminately killed by both sword forceful energy and blade forceful energy. The scene resembled a charred blackwood forest after a wildfire, or a battlefield after a war, with no spot left intact. Siwia did not take to the air to watch, but sat among the trees, waiting for the battle to end. Although he was reluctant to see a duel between brothers, at this point, he somewhat anticipated the outcome. Both being powerful 8-leaf practitioners, would the elder brother prevail, or would the younger brother's skill prove superior? Another 4 hours passed, and the scale of the battle diminished, seemingly nearing its end. Siwia then stood up and sped towards the direction of the fighting sounds. The fisherman looked gratefully at his departing figure. "Young hero, goodbye. We shall meet again." At the same time, Yu Shanrong's figure flickered. Left, center, right. 3 figures continuously fainted. This scene was like something out of a dream, unclear to see. The crowd recognized this as one of Yu Shanrong's signature sword moves. Returning, I enter the 3 souls. Yu Yinghai immediately held nothing back. With him at the center, a circular wave of forceful energy radiated outward. This burst, seemingly simple, was actually one of the most robust and domineering moves of the great mysterious heavenly seal. As the forceful energy was released, combined with the mysterious heavenly starlight, the blade forceful energy suddenly expanded and radiated. All the energy from the energy center energy sea was mobilized to its limit. The surrounding primal energy of heaven and earth surged like a tide, instantly creating a tidal wave, ruling the world. The massive blade forceful energy, like a pillar holding up the sky, smashed down with a tremendous force that made Hua Chongyang's heart tremble with fear. Quickly open the avatar. Block the massive forceful energy. Seeing this, the other 3 brothers realized what was happening and simultaneously activated their avatars, positioning themselves under the massive force. The tide-like forceful energy first sprang up and then crashed down with a thunderous impact. "We can't hold it back." Under the powerful rebound, the 4 avatars barely stabilized, but the massive force still seemed to be blown upwards by the wind. Siwia, who was just midway through, felt the overwhelming energy rush towards him. His brow furrowed, and he muttered, "This is bad." He immediately crossed his arms in front of him, attempting to block it. However, the next second, he was blown backwards. He smashed through more than 10 trees before slowly landing. The fisherman hurried forward to help him up. "Young hero, we meet again." Siwia's mouth bled, but he had no time to attend to it. "It's just the aftermath." He used all his strength to block the aftermath, and the injuries he sustained were still within an acceptable range. Wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth, Siwia continued to fly forward. The fisherman followed closely behind, shouting urgently, "Young hero, wait for me." At this time, on Lu Zhou's side, Duan Musheng saw the wave-like energy approaching and, far from being alarmed, felt a surge of excitement in his heart. The opportunity to prove himself finally came. Duan Musheng immediately activated his avatar, positioned it in front of the flying chariot, and shouted, "I'll block." Holy shit! Lu Zhou had intended to use the extraordinary power of heavenly writing to block these energies, but Duan Musheng beat him to it. With a loud bang, the flying chariot was pushed backwards, shaking like a sailboat on the waves. Lu Zhou furrowed his brows, steadied himself, and thought, "There's not much cooldown time left. Don't fail me at the crucial moment." At that moment, Yu Shanrong's 3 figures, under the dual assault of ruling the world and mysterious heavenly starlight, immediately dispersed, merging back into one. Yu Shanrong was sent flying backward. In the instant he flew backward, he flung the longevity sword from his hand. Yu Yinghai, in the midst of his burst, had no strength left to resist and could only glare furiously, making a desperate attempt to dodge to the side. However, with a swoosh, the longevity sword still grazed his shoulder and then struck straight down into the ground. At the same time, the jade blade also plunged into the soil with a thud. The scene quieted down, the battle abruptly stopped, and all was silent. After what felt like a long time, both men got up and faced each other from a distance again. They did not continue fighting. Their inherent pride would not allow them to battle in such a disheveled state. Blood trickled from the corner of Yu Shanrong's mouth, and Yu Yinghai's shoulder bore a bloodstain. After a moment of silence, "May their spoke. Both men laughed. Yu Yinghai broke the silence first, returning, I enter the three souls. After all, lacked a bit of essence. Yu Shanrong's brows slightly furrowed. Ruling the world lacked the emperor's confidence. You're out of primal energy. You're out of primal energy too. So, the question arises, who won and who lost? For a moment, both were somewhat embarrassed. Surely, one couldn't just unilaterally declare victory, right? The four great protectors are from the underworld sect and have no right to judge this battle. So, there was only one suitable person. Both Yu Yinghai and Yu Shanrong thought of the same person, Si Wuya. Speak of the devil, and he shall appear. Si Wuya appeared in their view, bowing respectfully. Greetings, eldest brother. Greetings, second brother. Yu Yinghai nodded. You've come at the right time, seventh brother. Yu Shanrong also looked at him. Seventh brother. It's good you're here. Yu Yinghai spoke. Tell us, between the second brother and me, who is superior? Yu Shanrong also seriously looked at him and said, seventh brother, just judge honestly. Who is more skilled, me or the eldest brother? Upon hearing this, Si Wuya was momentarily stunned. What does this have to do with me? Couldn't you just determine the winner through your sparring? I'm here to see the outcome too. I'm freaking out here, online and waiting. How should I answer? Si Wuya, ever so clever, quickly bowed and said, it's a draw. Eldest brothers ruling the world injured the second brother, and the second brother's return home injured the eldest brother. It's a draw. After saying this, he felt proud of his wit. However, both Yu Yinghai and Yu Shanrong's eyes simultaneously turned to him, seeming displeased with his answer. Si Wuya furrowed his brows, thinking to himself that it was not good, being too clever by half. It seems I've managed to offend them both. Yu Yinghai spoke in a displeased tone. In that case, we shall fight another day. Yu Shanrong responded, I couldn't ask for more. There must be a victor between the eldest brother and me. Then, Yu Yinghai, carrying the jade blade, flew back to the massive chariot, while Yu Shanrong also returned the longevity sword to its sheath on his back. Si Wuya sensed that something was amiss, but there was nothing he could say, so he could only watch helplessly as the eldest brother left. Second brother, are you alright? He tentatively asked, feeling that Yu Shanrong also seemed off. I'm fine. Yu Shanrong smiled, looking up at the massive chariot in the sky, and said, look. Si Wuya followed his gaze, but didn't notice anything unusual, unsure of what the second brother meant by that. Yu Shanrong continued, the eldest brother has been shaken by me. He was just stubbornly holding on. What can I do? Being the younger brother, I was just preserving his face. Hearing this, Si Wuya said worriedly, I see. So it turns out the second brother is actually the more skilled. Yu Shanrong smiled lightly, dismissing it. It's nothing. Meanwhile, Yu Yinghai returned to the flying chariot. Hua Chongyang and the others bowed simultaneously. We welcome the leader. Yu Yinghai, without a word, entered the flying chariot with an expressionless face and sat down in his chair with dignity and poise. Then, with a muffled groan, a trace of fresh blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. Though it was not much, it was enough to prove that Yu Yinghai, the leader of the foremost demonic sect who had defeated countless foes, was injured. The four great protectors looked at him with shock. Yu Yinghai wiped away the blood and said in a stern voice, keep quiet about this. Hua Chongyang nodded, then raised his hand to give an order. The flying chariot turned around, heading towards Purple Mist Mountain. Suddenly, Hua Chongyang pointed downwards. Leader, look. The other three protectors followed the direction Hua Chongyang was pointing to. It was a smaller, darker flying chariot hanging between two large branches. Bai Yuqing asked in confusion, are there others? Di Qing responded with a bow. Leader, these people are audacious. I request permission to fight, to annihilate them. Yu Yinghai was already feeling some anger when he spoke indifferently. Go ahead. As soon as he finished speaking, Bai Yuqing suddenly saw a cluster of auspicious energy sweeping towards the flying chariot. What's that? Yu Yinghai glanced briefly, shifting his gaze from the auspicious energy to the top of the flying chariot. Generally, the higher a cultivator's cultivation, the stronger their vision in unobstructed conditions. With this glance, he immediately recognized the familiar, aged figure. It was actually his master. He broke out in a cold sweat. Frightened, his face changed drastically, his body stiffened, followed by a bout of coughing. The four great protectors had not yet seen the auspicious energy clearly, turned around hastily, showing concern. Leader, Yu Yinghai feigned composure, shook his head. I'm fine. Let's go. Full speed back. Bai Yuqing, seeing the leader's serious expression and his coughing, thought that the leader and Yu Shanrong had been seriously injured in their contest, and it seemed the situation was not optimistic. Quickly responded, your command is my wish. The flying chariot then accelerated, quickly disappearing into the sky. Meanwhile, the demon-slaying sect's flying chariot, unable to withstand the force of the collision between Yu Yinghai and Yu Shanrong, was damaged and landed on the ground, unable to fly again. Duan Musheng, frightened, his face turned pale, quickly bowed to apologize. Elder Senior, forgive me. I am incapable. Lu Zhou helplessly looking at the surrounding mess, his heart anxious as if counting down the seconds. He looked up towards the distance, the flying chariot speeding away, with less than 10 minutes left on the timer. That just leaves the other troublemakers. His gaze turned towards Hundred Leaves Lake, pondering. Yu Shanrong and Si Wuya, they don't have the four great protectors guarding them. Where can they run? Such a fierce duel. Both must have sustained serious injuries, and Si Wuya was likely affected too. When the time is up, it will be a good opportunity to deal with the troublemakers troublemakers. On 100 Leaves Lake, Yu Shanrong, with his back turned, said lightly, "After this battle, I will retreat from the world. Junior brother Siwuya, you may go." But Siwuya was somewhat perplexed. "Are you sure?" Yu Shanrong sighed lightly. "If even you, junior brother Siwuya, cannot understand my intentions, who else can I count on? My mind is made up. You should understand." He gazed into the distance, seemingly enlightened, with no worries left in his heart. Siwuya hesitated for a moment, then asked, "How should I explain this to the eldest brother?" Yu Shanrong coolly replied, "He is already injured. The battle is decided. He will not pursue me further." Siwuya continued, "Second brother, I support your decision to withdraw from the world, but it doesn't have to mean cutting off all ties." Before he could finish, he heard Yu Shanrong coldly utter a single word, "Scram." Siwuya was immediately stunned, swallowing the rest of his words. The usually gentle, humble, and polite second brother had just spoken so harshly. Second brother had never used words like scram towards anyone before. At this point, more words were of no use. As the second brother said, "Is there anyone in this world who understands Yu Shanrong better than he does?" There was no room for persuasion. "Take care." After bowing, Siwuya walked towards the woods, and all around fell silent. Yu Shanrong walked alone deeper into the forest. Once sure no one was around, he could no longer contain himself. His figure wavered, and he couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. Despite his efforts to suppress it until now, he couldn't withstand the surging blood and chi within his body. This battle had indeed left him injured. Yu Shanrong sat down cross-legged, hands stacked, and began to meditate to stabilize his turbulent blood and chi. Within a few breaths, his blood and chi gradually calmed. However, just at that moment, a figure suddenly appeared in the woods. This person, with long hair and robes, carrying a long sword, walked step by step towards Yu Shanrong. The sunlight filtered through the trees onto him, his face slightly bearded and bearing a look of age. This person is none other than one of the three great sword fanatics of Cloud Sect, Luo Changqing. Luo Changqing bowed and said, "Cloud Sect's Luo Changqing has met the esteemed Sword Demon. I specifically request guidance from Sword Demon Senior. My senior brother, Sword Saint Luo Shursan, has been obsessed since his battle with you. Today I came to exchange a few moves with Senior Sword Demon." After hearing this, Yu Shanrong stopped and said, "Sorry, you are weak." Feeling it was not enough, he added, "Very uninteresting weak." He had said the same thing to Sword Saint Luo Shursan before, and now repeating it to Luo Changqing made no difference. To such people, Yu Shanrong was very dismissive, not appearing earlier or later, but just at this time. Was this a challenge? Clearly, it was the act of a despicable person taking advantage of others' weaknesses. However, Luo Changqing refused to give up, continuing to argue, "The weak who dare to challenge the strong are not truly weak. The strong who fear and always run away are the real weaklings." Yu Shanrong shook his head and said coldly, "Cloud Sect Sword Altar, in 1 month I will come to kill you." After saying this, he no longer paid attention to Luo Changqing and turned to leave. "Sorry, it doesn't need a month." Luo Changqing smiled, and the long sword on his back was immediately drawn. 1 into 2, 2 into 4, 4 into 8. Hundreds of sword forceful energies hovered in the air, arrayed around him. "Now, here in the cloud illuminating woodland, I, Luo Changqing, will take your life." As he spoke, he stepped on the ground and leaped into the air, all the sword forceful energy converging together, slashing towards Yu Shanrong. In the past, Yu Shanrong would have had countless ways to counter such a move, but now, his primal energy was almost exhausted, and his physical condition was far from what it used to be. Yu Shanrong drew the longevity sword with one hand, gathering all the remaining primal energy, the blade glowing faintly red. He decisively and cleanly swung the longevity sword horizontally, colliding head-on with Luo Changqing's sword forceful energy. Bang! At the moment of the weapon's collision, forceful energies intermingled, and Luo Changqing's sword forceful energy was completely severed. Yu Shanrong stepped back 3 paces, his footsteps slightly trembling. Although he hadn't gained the upper hand, he still maintained his composure. Seeing Yu Shanrong retreat 3 steps, something Luo Changqing had never imagined possible before, he achieved today. His heart surged with ecstasy. "If today I can successfully take down Yu Shanrong's head, then my name, Luo Changqing, will resound through great flame." Luo Changqing, looking at Yu Shanrong, excitedly continued, "Sword Demon Senior, now, who do you think is weaker between us?" Yu Shanrong ignored him, gripping the longevity sword tightly, feeling the scant remaining primal energy inside him. "Why don't you speak? Let me see returning. I enter the 3 souls." Luo Changqing, excited to the point of irrationality, seemed on the verge of joy as if he was about to claim a head. Yu Shanrong still did not speak, but a slight smile crossed his lips. Just then, a wave of auspicious energy suddenly appeared in the sky. Yu Shanrong looked up to see Whitezerd riding low on a cloud of auspiciousness. In fact, Lu Zhou had been piloting Whitezerd nearby for some time, but had not rushed to make his presence known. He had lingered nearby for over 10 minutes, observing while searching for Siwuya, but never finding him. After inwardly cursing Troublemaker, he turned his attention to the confrontation between Luo Changqing and Yu Shanrong. He had seen everything that had just happened and understood what was going on. At that moment, Luo Changqing looked up to see Whitezerd bathed in auspicious energy, his brows furrowed slightly, puzzled. "Who is this eminent figure?" Yu Shangrong slowly turned around, looked up, and shuddered, his mind going blank. Although he is the fearsome sword demon, although he has challenged countless sword masters, and although he fears neither heaven nor earth, his heart still pounds violently and his lips tremble when he sees this old man slowly uttering one word, "Master." Upon hearing the term master, Luo Changqing immediately breaks out in a cold sweat. He had not left his seclusion for many years, continuously cultivating in Cloud Sect. Years ago, he had visited Evil Sky Pavilion once and seen Ji Tiandao from a distance, but he had never truly faced him up close. The elderly figure before him, one hand behind his back, the other stroking his beard, exuded a celestial and moral aura, showing no trace of the demonic air typical of those from the demonic path. Additionally, with Whitesword below him radiating auspicious energy, it was impossible to associate him with the demonic path. He's the master of Evil Sky Pavilion, the greatest demon of this era. At this moment, Lu Zhou glances at the timer, nodding to himself. Not bad. The cooldown is over. From his elevated position, his gaze falls on Luo Changqing, and he says coldly, "You speak so righteously of taking advantage of others' peril. How can I tolerate you?" As soon as the words are out, Lu Zhou lightly taps the back of Whitesword with his toe, leaps into the air, and with a single palm raise, a nameless sword suddenly appears in his palm. Luo Changqing is terrified, stammering, You, don't come any closer." Fear fills his eyes as he fixates on Lu Zhou in the air. In desperation, he rotates his long sword, gathering all his strength, and thousands of sword forceful energies form in the air, all aimed at Lu Zhou diving from the sky. However, in the next second, his vision blurs, as if he has entered a dream. This is Yu Shanrong's famed skill, returning. I enter the three souls. Lu Zhou's figure splits into left, center, and right, instantly vanishing. Whoosh! When he reappears, the three figures merge into one. Everything came to an abrupt halt. The nameless sword sliced through the thousand sword forceful energies and also through Luo Changqing's side sword and chest. The entire motion was fluid, devoid of any unnecessary flourishes, and even lacked a violent discharge of primal energy. Just one sword, and it was all over. Luo Changqing's eyes widened, and at the moment the sword forceful energy disappeared, his eyes became utterly empty, increasingly hollow. He looked down at his broken long sword in his hands, then at his chest. A bloodline split open, and blood gushed forth, his life draining away at a terrifying rate. "Save me." His voice was faint and desperate. Yu Shanrong saw the scene, his brows furrowed, his eyes filled with dread and horror. "Ding! You have killed a target and gained 1,500 merit points." After dealing with Luo Changqing, Lu Zhou stroked his beard, turned around, and coldly glanced at Yu Shanrong, uttering indifferently, "Wicked disciple." Yu Shanrong's body shuddered, and he stood frozen in place. Seeing his master suddenly appearing in the cloud illuminating woodland filled Yu Shanrong with disbelief. He couldn't understand why his master would be here. Lu Zhou's gaze was icy, and he slowly asked, "How did I teach you back then? Do you remember? Defecting from Evil Sky Pavilion, fighting your own sect." As Lu Zhou spoke, he took steps forward, his tone steady and forceful, each word hitting home, throwing Yu Shanrong into complete disarray. This relentless approach unsettled Yu Shanrong. He looked up at Lu Zhou and asked with a bitter smile, "Master, are you trying to kill me again?" Lu Zhou stopped in his tracks and countered, "Should I not kill?" Yu Shanrong's face flickered with a poignant smile, trying to stand straight, making himself look less disheveled. He spoke softly, "In my hometown, there's a plant called Shunhua. It blooms in the morning and dies by evening. Knowing it will wither yet still carefully tended to. Knowing it will die, why care for it so meticulously? But sometimes I wonder, knowing death is inevitable, why cling so tightly?" After hearing these words, Lu Zhou shook his head slightly and said, "Birth, aging, sickness, and death are natural to humans. Everyone will die. If by your reasoning, since everyone will eventually die from the moment they are born, shouldn't they just end it themselves? Where did you learn such twisted logic?" He pondered for a moment, then took another step and said in a deep voice, "To live, that is the reason." Yu Shanrong's eyes were complex as he slowly stepped back, murmuring, "Everyone wants to live long, yet everyone cannot escape this end." Hearing this, Lu Zhou frowned and exclaimed sharply, "Nonsense. Confess and accept your punishment now." Yu Shanrong shook his head and said, "A day as a teacher is a lifetime as a father. Please forgive me. I cannot return with you." Lu Zhou coldly asked, "You think you can escape?" Yu Shanrong's mouth curled into a cold smile. "You underestimate me. Even if master does not intervene, Luo Changqing is no match for me." After saying this, he lightly leaped onto the longevity sword and soared away by sword flight. This was due to his high synchrony with the longevity sword, greatly reducing the consumption of primal energy. Unfortunately, not many could achieve this, and it also significantly increased his flight speed. After all, heavenly grade weapons are extremely rare and precious and require a perfect level of resonance. Seeing Yu Shanrong attempting to escape, Lu Zhou remained indifferent, his hand crushing an enhanced version of the cage binding. A golden energy formed a counterclockwise swirling vortex, quickly pursuing Yu Shanrong. Yu Shanrong flew rapidly towards the depths of the cloud illuminating woodland on his sword, while the sparkling golden energy formed a huge binding character, chasing him like a meteor cutting through the sky, striking his body with precision. "Ah!" Yu Shanrong let out a low moan as all the primal energy within him was suddenly constricted. He lost his balance and fell swiftly, crashing to the ground. His energy center energy sea was empty, leaving him unable to control his flight. Seeing this, Duan Musheng, along with the brothers from demon-slaying sect, lined up and slowly surrounded him. "Stay back. This is the sword demon." Duan Musheng hastily ordered his men to stop. He bowed and said, "Let's wait for the elder to arrive." Duan Musheng swallowed nervously, bowed, and said, "Greetings, sword demon senior." Yan Rong didn't even glance at Duan Musheng and the others. In his view, such people were not worthy of speaking with him. Ding! For capturing the traitorous disciple Yan Rong, you are awarded 1,000 merit points. Hearing the system notification, Lu Zhou approached calmly. Yan Rong took several deep breaths, watching as his master walked towards him slowly. This was the only person in the world who could make him feel utterly powerless. The cloud illuminating woodland was eerily quiet until the bell from cloud illuminating hermitage broke the rare silence. Lu Zhou looked up at the distant sound, reflecting, "During my brief stay at the cloud illuminating hermitage, I've grown accustomed to the sound of the bells at dawn and dusk. Where are the paths in the ancient woods? In which part of the deep mountains does the bell toll?" Lu Zhou withdrew his gaze and asked softly, "Where's that troublemaker Siwuya?" Yan Rong shook his head and answered in a low voice, "He has already left." Seeing his reluctance, Lu Zhou rebuked, "I imparted all my skills to you, and this is your competence?" Yan Rong was startled, not understanding the deeper meaning in his master's words, but he didn't ask further, staying silent. After all, victors are kings, and losers are villains, as it has always been. "Take him away." Lu Zhou turned and walked away with a wave of his sleeve. Duan Musheng quickly bowed, ready to act, but Yan Rong coldly glanced at Duan Musheng and the others, saying, "I can walk on my own." Hearing this, Duan Musheng and the others quickly stepped back, bowing their heads, not daring to approach further. He felt a hint of humiliation from being disdained, but he did not dare to retort. But what of it? Even if Yan Rong is now a prisoner, he is not someone Duan Musheng can easily handle. However, to witness such an extraordinary person being taken away by his master is also a great fortune in life. When he grows old, he can boast to others, on a certain year, month, and day, he witnessed the peak battle between the first and second disciples of Evil Sky Pavilion. What a spectacular and grand sight it was, unforgettable for a lifetime. Lu Zhou spoke, "First, return to Cloud Illuminating Hermitage." Upon hearing this, Yan Rong silently looked up at Lu Zhou. Did this mean that his master had been waiting at Cloud Illuminating Hermitage all along? But if that was the case, why didn't he show up earlier, to reap the benefits of the fisherman's struggle? Unfortunately, thinking about this now was meaningless. He could only silently follow his master back to Cloud Illuminating Hermitage. After everyone left the area, deep in the dense forest of Cloud Illuminating Woodland, Siwuya let out a long breath. If it hadn't been discovered in time, I might have been the one to fall this time. He sighed internally. Poor second brother. What will he do now? Remembering that body-binding divine spell, Siwuya frowned. The same method appearing again made him recall his previous judgment. Perhaps the master really had found a way to break through the great limit. Thinking this, Siwuya shook his head with a bitter smile, murmuring to himself, trying to save face but suffering for it. Clearly injured, yet still stubbornly resisting. Now what? Just now. If only the second brother didn't care about his face, he could have avoided this calamity. Such is fate. Moments later, everyone returned to Cloud Illuminating Hermitage. Lu Zhou walked with his hands behind his back to the windowsill, his gaze falling on the devastated Hundred Leaves Lake. Yan Rong stood behind him, expressionless. After a long silence, Lu Zhou finally spoke. "Sit." With a soft sound, the longevity sword slipped from Yan Rong's hand and fell to the ground. In such a situation, Yan Rong couldn't care less about his pride. He quickly bent down to pick up the longevity sword. Lu Zhou stroked his beard, glanced at the longevity sword in his arms as if remembering something, and said lightly, "You've been in the sect for 275 years. Do you still remember the first rule I told you when you entered?" Yan Rong paused, then answered, "No infighting among fellow disciples." Lu Zhou's gaze turned stern. "You knew and yet you violated it." Yan Rong explained in a low voice, "It was merely a spar with my elder brother." "A spar?" Lu Zhou turned around, his gaze piercing as he said coldly, "I gave you your power, I gave you your weapon, and I can take it back." These words tightened Yan Rong's heart, as if he had been struck hard. He involuntarily clutched the longevity sword in his arms, like a child who had erred, hanging his head in silence. Yan Rong, who had never been so restrained and fearful in front of anyone, now seemed utterly ridiculous in his pride and status before his master. He was the fearsome sword demon, but in front of an old man, he was as bewildered as a child who had erred. Seeing Yan Rong silent, Lu Zhou asked, "Why did you leave Evil Sky Pavilion?" Yan Rong furrowed his brows, looking up. "You really don't remember?" Lu Zhou answered calmly, "I forgot." That missing memory was indeed gone from his mind. Seventh junior brother said, "You've changed a lot." At first, I didn't believe it. Yan Rong looked complexly at the old man before him. He remembered many things from the past, a young child who has now, nearly 300 years later, become the fearsome sword demon, while his master was approaching the end of his life, inevitably sighing. Lu Zhou raised an eyebrow. "That's not important," Yan Rong said. "Perhaps it's better forgotten." "Scoundrel." Lu Zhou's voice boomed like a large bell. At that word, Yan Rong reflected reflexively knelt down. Lu Zhou looked at him directly, unwilling to speak. Yu Shanrong lowered his head to look at the ground. Disciple did it for your good, it's best forgotten. Hearing this, Lu Zhou clapped his hands, sending a forceful energy wind. Slap, neither light nor heavy. Yu Shanrong did not dodge or flinch. The slap landed on his cheek, burning like fire. Ding, punishing Yu Shanrong, awarding 300 merit points. I have plenty of time. Hearing Lu Zhou's soft chant, Duan Musheng hurried in from outside, respectfully kneeling on the ground and declaring, Junior is here. Please command, Elder, through blades and flames. Without hesitation, Lu Zhou nodded. Take him away. Saying that, he then moved to the windowsill, flying next to Whitesard. Duan Musheng glanced at Yu Shanrong, his posture and aura clearly forbidding touch, radiating a keep your distance vibe. He dared not approach. Only by Lu Zhou's side did he feel somewhat relieved. Elder, take who? Lu Zhou looked back at him. Are you very scared? Duan Musheng was startled, encouraged himself. Junior is not afraid. With Elder backing me, I fear nothing. Lu Zhou then flew onto Whitesard's back. Very good. Duan Musheng approached Yu Shanrong, who just gave him an understanding look, then coldly turned his gaze elsewhere. Duan Musheng was nearly in tears. How can I not be scared? It's impossible not to be. Lu Zhou stepped onto Whitesard, circling above Cloud Illuminating Hermitage briefly. He had planned to stay a few more days to reminisce about the past, but with much to do, he had to return sooner. All his thoughts were of the past, and all his reach was of regret. Not knowing Cloud Illuminating Temple, several miles into Cloud Peak, ancient woods without paths, deep mountains, where does the bell toll? As he was about to leave, Xian Jing, Buddhist monk from Cloud Illuminating Hermitage, appeared in front. Amitabha, Mr. G, take good care. Hearing this, he saw Jing Yan's reflection in Xian Jing, persistent, independent, steadfast. If such a picturesque place truly fell into ruin, wouldn't it be even more regrettable? Moreover, being far from human cities, it is a natural haven for summer retreat and recovery. Even if opening a school to recruit disciples, it is also a good place for cultivation. If there is nothing else later, wanting to rest, it is also a place to come. Thinking this, Lu Zhou spoke loudly. Inside the painting in the room is a Buddhist technique I left behind. I hope you cultivate well and do not waste it. Cloud Illuminating Hermitage is a good place. Xian Jing's eyes suddenly brightened upon hearing this, quickly bowing to Lu Zhou. Thank you, Mr. G. On behalf of my master, thank Mr. G. Take care of yourself. Lu Zhou then rode Whitesard into the clouds. Stepping on the clouds, Duan Musheng, gathering courage, used forceful energy to carry Yu Shanrong, following behind. Farewell, master. We at Demon Slaying Sect welcome the master's return. As evening approached, on the plaza of Evil Sky Pavilion, Zhou Jifeng and Pan Zhong looked up to see Whitesard coming on the clouds. The pavilion lord is back. The two stopped in unison. Pan Zhong puzzledly watched Whitesard's tail. Duan Musheng and Yu Shanrong. Who are those two? Zhou Jifeng didn't recognize them either. Both being younger juniors, they had mostly just heard various legends about Yu Shanrong, naturally unrecognizable. Surely they were not ordinary people. Lu Zhou jumped down from Whitesard and directly swept his sleeve. Take him to Reflection Cave. Pan Zhong and Zhou Jifeng paused. Isn't he new? Pan Zhong suddenly felt this routine strangely familiar, remembering when Mr. 8 Zhu Honghong was captured. It was treated the same way. Could this elegantly mannered man also be one of Pavilion Lord's disciples? If so, could it be the eldest or the second? Regardless of which master it was, they were both beyond his reach. Pan Zhong quickly elbowed Zhou Jifeng, fearing a godlike opponent and a pig-like teammate. Better not mess up. Zhou Jifeng, understanding, approached Yu Shanrong and Duan Musheng, saying, please. The attitude respectful, the posture appropriate, the tone and demeanor all very standard. Both thought this wave should be okay, right? Seeing this, Lu Zhou turned suspiciously. What are you two doing? Pan Zhong and Zhou Jifeng were momentarily at a loss. Duan Musheng quickly waved his hands. I'm a guest, not me. Saying this, he pointed at Yu Shanrong. Yu Shanrong, seeing the two so restrained, was somewhat pleased, then revealed a faint smile. I'll go myself. No need to trouble you two. Zhou Jifeng quickly followed. After they left, Lu Zhou looked at Pan Zhong. Is old Fourth not here? Pan Zhong answered, Mr. Fourth and Mr. Ninth haven't returned yet, but Mr. Fourth has already sent a letter. He will return tomorrow. Lu Zhou nodded and returned to Evil Sky Pavilion. Duan Musheng didn't quite know what to do. At that moment, Pan Zhong made a gesture. What may I call you? Duan Musheng bowed slightly. Demon Slaying Sect's Duan Musheng. Who is that courteous and polite brother? Second Mr. Yu Shanrong. Hearing this name, Pan Zhong couldn't help but gasp. That was close. I'm freaking talented. Meanwhile, Zhou Jifeng and the others had already arrived in front of Reflection Cave. He nodded and grinned. Please. Yu Shanrong shook his head and commented, I mean no disrespect, but his elderly eyesight has indeed worsened a lot over the years. Implying, how could someone who couldn't even clarify identities carelessly flatter to enter Evil Sky Pavilion? How good could his master's judgment be? Zhou Jifeng continued nodding. You're right. After speaking, he shouted into Reflection Cave, Mr. 8. Zhu Honghong's voice immediately responded, speak quickly if you have something to say. Fart if you need to. Your grandpa Zhu is still in bitter cultivation. Don't bother for no reason. Pavilion Lord ordered me to bring a newcomer into Reflection Cave. Please don't mind, Mr. 8. As soon as he spoke, Zhu Honghong's impatient voice came through. Let him sleep outside. replied. Also, from now on, have him make foot bathing water for me. Zhou Jifeng was stunned upon hearing this. Although he didn't know who the courteous person beside him was, he knew it was someone he shouldn't provoke, but he also couldn't afford to provoke the person inside. What to do? What should he say? Before he could speak, Yu Shangrong waved his hand and walked towards Reflection Cave. Zhou Jifeng quickly bowed. After you. Yu Shangrong glanced sideways and said, thank you. No trouble at all. No trouble at all. Seeing his amiable response, Zhou Jifeng repeatedly waved his hand, deeply touched. During his time in Evil Sky Pavilion, when had anyone ever acknowledged his efforts with a thank you? So, he reminded him, this brother, inside there's Mr. 8 of Evil Sky Pavilion. Please bear with him. Yu Shangrong nodded, then confidently stepped into the barrier of Reflection Cave. Hearing footsteps approaching, Honghong, who had been watching ants move, suddenly exploded in anger. Can't you understand what I said? He rose in fury, throwing a punch behind him, but upon seeing the person before him, his eyes widened, and he froze on the spot. Regaining his composure, he hurriedly dropped to his knees, his expression extremely ingratiating. Brother, have you washed your feet yet? I'll fetch the water right now. After saying this, he bent over and scurried out of Reflection Cave. Come back. Hearing Yu Shangrong's voice, Zhu Honghong immediately turned and knelt again, tears streaming down his face as he begged, second brother, I was wrong. Yu Shangrong approached a stone bench and slowly sat down, saying, no need to be nervous, I won't blame you. Besides, my cultivation is bound. What are you afraid of? His mind wasn't really on these matters. Being brought back to Evil Sky Pavilion by his master, he inevitably felt some bitterness. After all, he was the elder brother. How could he stoop to old 8's level? Zhu Honghong didn't see it that way. He solemnly slapped his own chubby face mercilessly. Brother, I really was wrong. Feeling it wasn't enough, he slapped his face a few more times. Zhou Jifeng, outside the cave hearing the noise, found it strange, so he approached to look. This careless look stunned him. Hearing their conversation, if Zhou Jifeng still didn't understand, then he really would be a fool. Terrified, he fell to the ground, quickly got up, and ran towards Evil Sky Pavilion. Yu Shangrong frowned slightly and shook his head. Enough. Zhu Honghong was overjoyed. Thank you, second brother, for your magnanimity. I'll give myself a few more slaps to remember this. Yu Shangrong revealed a smile. Old 8th, it's been a long time since we've seen each other. Second brother, you always appear without a trace. How could I have the chance to see you? Yu Shangrong smiled and pointed to the opposite side. Sit. Zhu Honghong dared not sit. Standing is quite comfortable. Yu Shangrong asked, have you been living in Reflection Cave all this time? Zhu Honghong replied, indeed, accepting punishment. Yu Shangrong looked at him, sensing a different aura, about to break through the divine court realm. He knew Zhu Honghong's cultivation technique had only 7 levels, missing the core mantras of the last 2 levels. Without these, stepping into the nascent divinity tribulation realm was nearly impossible. Zhu Honghong scratched his head. Master passed the last 2 core mantras to me. He also said, if I successfully break through, I can move into the southern pavilion. Hearing this, Yu Shangrong furrowed his brow, somewhat incredulous. Master passed the techniques to you? Zhu Honghong nodded repeatedly. Indeed, second brother, how come you are in Evil Sky Pavilion? Yu Shangrong did not answer directly, but briefly glanced at Zhu Honghong. Zhu Honghong immediately panicked, raised his hand decisively, and slapped his own mouth. I was wrong. Isn't this bringing up what should not be mentioned? Yu Shangrong didn't mind and simply said, bad luck. This left Zhu Honghong confused. What does your return to Evil Sky Pavilion have to do with luck? Meanwhile, in the East Pavilion of Evil Sky Pavilion, Lu Zhou approached the table and looked at the ancient sheepskin map, noticing it had finally changed. In addition to the previously clear Divine Capital and Sword Tomb, a new location in the northwest corner of Yong Province appeared this time, marked by a grass icon on the map. Lu Zhou looked suspiciously at the small grass, suddenly remembering an earlier system notification. Trigger a quest. Any of his actions could trigger a quest. Does this mean capturing Yu Shangrong triggered the Xunhua grass quest? Lu Zhou then opened the system quest interface, looking at the main quest, Reform Yu Shangrong. There were also 2 subquests, one on the lifespan of Xunhua grass, and another on opening a new scroll of heavenly writing. Indeed, from his recent interactions with Yu Shangrong, this quest seems far from simple. He stroked his beard, pondering, why would Ji Tiandao want to kill his disciple? A teacher is supposed to educate and solve doubts. While he was pondering, a system notification sounded. Ding. For punishing Zhu Honghong, receive 50 merit points. Hearing this, Lu Zhou was somewhat speechless. How could he earn merit points under these circumstances? He stopped dwelling on these momentarily unanswerable questions and checked his inventory. Whether avatar or 9 cycles of yin and yang, to step into the nascent divinity tribulation realm, one must condense 100 tribulation inside avatar. He opened the item card tab again, finding the prices had risen. The system was clearly forcing him to use cards sparingly. Killing a major cultivator rewards only 1500 merit points, yet purchasing 1 card costs 3000 merit points. Who would make such a loss-making deal? However, this also urged him to keep getting stronger. As evening approached, Lu Zhou looked at the 2 tasks and closed his eyes to contemplate heavenly writing. According to his previous contemplations, 1 full surge of extraordinary power could be used twice for great supernatural powers, or burst forth even greater power at once. If combined with a weapon, weapon, a small portion of the extraordinary power could also be lethal. Moreover, extraordinary power can be sustained over time. If he encountered the 10 absolute array again, extraordinary power would be his greatest reliance. Item cards would then be secondary. Time flew by quickly, and the next morning, as soon as Lu Zhou opened his eyes, a system notification sounded again. Ding. After contemplating the heavenly writing scroll human 200 times, receive a heavenly writing scroll opening. Lu Zhou nodded in satisfaction. According to the pattern, every 100 contemplations would grant one heavenly writing scroll opening. However, this time it seemed somewhat stingy, not easily fulfilled just by flipping through. Boom! Noise erupted outside. Before Lu Zhou could ask, a voice came through. Pavilion Lord, Mr. 8 seems to have broken through. Got it. Lu Zhou got up and walked out of the East Pavilion, feeling somewhat helpless. Could it be that this kind of free-range approach makes breakthroughs easier? Xiao Yu has been on the mountain for years, and after returning to Evil Sky Pavilion, I haven't stinted in guiding her, even helping her remove the internal cold poison. Logically, with such a renowned teacher guiding her, her breakthrough should have been faster, but old 8th took the lead. Meanwhile, inside Reflection Cave, Honghong excitedly looked at the bare golden lotus, which seemed very pleasing. Thanks for your guidance, second brother. Yan Rong smiled faintly. Your talent was always good. The previous technique might have been wrong, but it also helped you store a lot of primal energy. The precious Zen robe was a big help. Honghong kept flattering. Second brother, in my eyes, you are the strongest. Yan Rong glanced at him. Is that so? Honghong sheepishly smiled. Old 8th here speaks nothing but the truth, straight from the heart. Second brother, don't make fun of me. With my brains, I can't fool you. Just as he was about to continue flattering, Duan Musheng's voice suddenly came from outside. Duan Musheng, greetings second brother. At the same time, under Pan Zhong's gossip, people from Evil Sky Pavilion also curiously gathered near Reflection Cave to watch. Duan Xing, as a guest, just watched from a distance. For such an astonishing swordsmanship genius, it would be almost impossible not to be curious. They had just arrived and happened to see Duan Musheng arriving in front of Reflection Cave to pay his respects. Yan Rong greeted him with a smile. Third junior brother, you're the same as ever. Duan Musheng bowed, hearing from Pan Zhong that second brother was captured by Master and brought to Reflection Cave. How could I, as a junior brother, not come to visit? There was an undertone to his words, superficially respectful, but with a slight teasing tone. Pan Zhong, not far away, heard this and stomped his feet in frustration. Am I really that easy? I kindly informed everyone. How did it get twisted when it reached third brother? Pan Lydian gave him a look, somewhat disappointed. What are you afraid of? Pan Zhong, lacking confidence, whispered, Old Pan, this is second brother. Pan Lydian nodded. I know. Aren't you afraid at all? Afraid isn't quite the right word, but who wouldn't have respect for the strong? Hearing this, Pan Zhong was left speechless. You make fear sound so noble. That's really something. Thinking about it, Pan Lydian, who had traveled far and wide and experienced countless life and death situations, even venturing into the Blackwood Forest, had said he wasn't afraid, and that could indeed be justified. During this time, Pan Zhong and Pan Lydian had spent time together, and Pan Zhong had often heard him boast about his past adventures. Inside Reflection Cave, Yan Rong smiled and said, Third junior brother has gotten much stronger than before. Duan Musheng confidently replied, Thanks to Master's guidance, I've made some minor achievements. How many leaves? Just past 3 leaves. Hearing from Pan Zhong, second brother's cultivation is sealed. Junior brother, lacking talent, would like to spar with second brother. At this moment, a female cultivator teasingly looked towards Pan Zhong. Are you married? Pan Zhong honestly shook his head. Do you have someone special then? Hearing this, he shook his head again. He probably won't live long then. So tragic. Oh well, but dying by second brother's hand is also a kind of happiness. Being alone isn't so bad. If he dies, he dies. Hearing the teasing from these people, Pan Zhong was immediately dumbfounded. Yan Rong gave him a glance and gently began. Listen to your senior brother's advice. You are still weak. Duan Musheng lifted his overlord's spear and planted it into the ground. How do I know if I'm weak if I don't try? I won't take advantage of you. I won't use primal energy during our spar. Honghong waved his hands repeatedly. Why must you two brothers do this? Old 8th, get out of the way, Duan Musheng said without even looking at Honghong. Seeing his persistence, Yan Rong shook his head, took a deep breath. He lifted his longevity sword. His thumb flicked lightly, and the longevity sword unsheathed. He held the sword in his right hand, lifted it towards the barrier, picked it, and the barrier opened. Yan Rong just walked out. Seeing this scene, Pan Lydian nodded in admiration. Just like what I thought. When the weapon's compatibility with its owner reaches a certain level, they can control it, and when they also understand the formations, they can easily find the barrier's weak spots and move in and out effortlessly. He also once mentioned this to little Yuaner. After exiting the Reflection Cave, Yan Rong directly approached Duan Musheng. He walked close, almost half a foot away, his figure a bit more slender. Yan Rong was even taller. By stature, Duan Musheng was more robust, which became even more evident as they stood close. As the saying goes, the bold are skilled, and so was Yan Rong. He didn't have primal energy, yet he had the courage to stand half a foot away from Duan Musheng. Duan Musheng stepped back, then bowed his hands. Second second senior brother, please enlighten me. Yu Shanrong responded casually, there's no need for formalities among fellow disciples. This posture provoked Duan Musheng. He didn't bother with more idle talk. He raised his overlord spear and thrust directly. The techniques of spear and sword have their similarities, with heavenly first speed being both a sword and spear technique. Relying purely on physical strength to wield the overlord spear to this extent was indeed rare. Yu Shanrong stood still. Only when the cold tip of the spear came close did he slightly sidestep. Raising his hand, his right hand's index and middle fingers appeared in front of his breath, firmly clamping down on the tip of the overlord spear. With a bang, everyone exclaimed in shock, that's possible? Immediately after, Yu Shanrong pulled back. Duan Musheng uncontrollably lurched forward. Yu Shanrong then swiftly moved forward, striking with a palm directly at his opponent's chest. Power over technique, real battle experience. You still have a long way to go. Yu Shanrong's words directly infuriated Duan Musheng, a naturally competitive person, more so than Yinghai and Yu Shanrong in terms of competitive spirit. Duan Musheng shouted angrily, holding the overlord spear with both hands. He stepped on the ground and leaped into the air, the overlord spear swirling fiercely, its force formidable. Yu Shanrong strolled leisurely, stepping back while dodging, the spear's tip always stopping half an inch from him, unable to reach him. With the overlord spear raised, from top to bottom spear shadows appeared, a scene that earned continuous praise from the crowd. Merely relying on physical strength to bring out such speed with the overlord spear, it was clear that his training under the waterfall had significantly advanced. Hua Wudao nodded. This is the 100 scorching strikes from the heavenly first decision overlord spear, a forceful technique that can produce over 100 spear shadows. If infused with primal energy, it could penetrate the 4 words 6 union seal. It's Elder Hua who understands it deeply. I've learned a lot. This statement sounds odd. Hua Wudao must have watched the 100 scorching strikes countless times, even dreaming about the shadows of the overlord spear moving wildly in his sleep. At this moment, the 100 shadows of the overlord spear disappeared, then leaped upward, stacking spear shadows, simultaneously attacking Yu Shanrong. Just when everyone thought Yu Shanrong was going to suffer for underestimating his opponent, he smiled slightly and drew his longevity sword, responding with even faster sword speed, more extreme movements, and more exaggerated sword shadows. The collision of 2 heavenly weapons sparked fiercely, each strike hitting the overlord spear. Each strike was supremely accurate without error. The final sword stroke lifted from below, striking the tip of the overlord spear, sending it flying backward before the 1,000-layered waves could even complete. Duan Musheng flipped backward in midair, and upon landing, he staggered back dozens of steps, finally crashing into a stone wall with a loud bang, causing small stones to fall. Both sides ceased. Duan Musheng somewhat unwilling to accept these were his strongest moves, yet they seemed so futile in front of Yu Shanrong. Seeing this, the crowd was silent, stunned by Yu Shanrong's seemingly simple techniques, especially Pan Litian, Leng Luo, and Hua Wudao. Laymen watched the excitement, experts observed the essence. They understood how Yu Shanrong had perfected his swordsmanship. Duan Musheng, not convinced, gripped his overlord spear tightly, looking at the indifferent Yu Shanrong, wanting to charge again. Yu Shanrong shook his head and said, give up, it's pointless. How is it pointless? Duan Musheng didn't understand. If we give up when facing the strong, then how can we talk about progress in the future? Yu Shanrong smiled slightly without explaining, instead looking towards the onlookers. Isn't there anyone who knows the score at Golden Court Mountain? Implying, someone advised this fool. Hua Wudao spoke up. Duan Musheng, no need to fight anymore. Duan Musheng frowned slightly, somewhat displeased. Even Elder Hua thinks I can't beat second senior brother. Hua Wudao coughed twice, saying, at Mr. Second's level, whether it's swordsmanship or spear techniques, it's all about killing, all forged through life and death experiences. Without enough tempering, even training under a waterfall for a long time won't allow you to defeat Mr. Second. Experience from life and death challenges isn't something you can gain from mere theories or advice. Leng Luo nodded. Indeed, Pan Litian also agreed. This old man thinks so too. Others looked skeptically at the elderly of the council. Usually, they would call the disciples of Evil Sky Pavilion by their names, but now seeing Yu Shanrong, they called him Mr. Second. Isn't this preferential treatment? Duan Musheng snorted. Not necessarily. With that, he suddenly raised his spear and began an even more fierce attack than before, rushing forward like a landslide. Yu Shanrong flicked the spear tip upward with a gesture, not retreating anymore but advancing instead. Duan Musheng had no choice but to retreat. Otherwise, the overlord spear, being too long, couldn't exert its power. As soon as he stepped back, Yu Shanrong closed in again, faster than him. The onlookers shook their heads in resignation, sighing at the disparity, the difference between heaven and earth. Just when everyone thought Duan Musheng was certain to lose, he suddenly unleashed his primal energy. With a boom, it radiated outwards. Yu Shanrong, whose cultivation was sealed, bore the brunt of it, blown away as if hit by a blast, soaring backward. Yu Shanrong appeared calm on the surface, but his vital energy was roiling. With a whoosh, his pure skill made him look not at all disheveled, even flying back straight and elegantly, landing smoothly. Ding! Punish Yu Shanrong. Reward 300 points of merit. The scene fell silent. Clearly Duan Musheng had broken the rules. He had used primal energy. After releasing his primal energy, Duan Musheng seemed to lose the will to continue fighting, ashamed and unable to face himself. Having used primal energy and still not being able to defeat Yan Rong, only managing to push him back. What more is there to say? Duan Musheng walked up to Yan Rong, bowing respectfully. I was disrespectful, second senior brother. No big deal, Yan Rong responded nonchalantly. Just then, a slightly reproachful voice came from the back of the crowd. Is this what you call the way of the sword? The crowd parted. Coughing sounds arose as they hurriedly stepped back. At the same time, from behind came the voice. Elder Lu Zhou, with his hands behind his back, walked directly up to the two. His gaze swept over the crowd. Duan Musheng's face changed dramatically. He shot forward, bowing. Master, I was just sparring with second senior brother. I admit my mistake. Honghong hurriedly knelt to pay respects. Disciple greets master. Fortunate to receive master's guidance, I have luckily stepped into the nascent divinity tribulation realm, successfully condensing the 100 tribulation insight avatar. Lu Zhou glanced at Honghong. In just over 3 months, Honghong had not only eliminated the restless energy within his body, but also successfully stepped into the nascent divinity tribulation realm, which was indeed surprising. He waved his hand casually. The barrier disappeared. This meant that they could leave the reflection cave. Honghong was overjoyed, kowtowing in thanks. Thank you, master. Your magnanimity and divine might are unparalleled. May you live a long and boundless life. This flattery is indeed hard, making one's scalp tingle. Lu Zhou saw Honghong's loyalty increase, and that was enough for him. He then turned around to look at Yan Rong. Name, Yan Rong. Identity, gentleman of the human race. Realm, nascent divinity tribulation realm. Bound. These were the details known about Yan Rong upon first meeting. Nothing surprising, nothing astonishing. Yan Rong was somewhat surprised by the scrutiny, lowering his head and calling out, Master. After hearing this, Lu Zhou made a startling move. He bowed to Yan Rong. This old man does not deserve such. Yan Rong was taken aback. When had he ever seen his master bow like this? His master, who had always been aloof and looked down on all beings. Why would he say such a thing? This old man does not deserve such, really startled him. Yan Rong immediately knelt on one knee, his fist touching the ground as his gaze fell. To have the master bow to the disciple, even if he were immensely proud, he could not bear it. Lu Zhou stood still, stroking his beard. Sometimes, unnecessary pride only harms you. Yan Rong, looking at the ground, spoke. A sword should indeed be somewhat proud. Overconfidence becomes arrogance, and arrogance blinds. Do you really think your swordsmanship is invincible? Hearing his master's words, Yan Rong suppressed his voice and replied, I dare not. Lu Zhou raised his tone. No, you dare. Others watched with trepidation. They dared not even breathe heavily, all wondering how this greatest demon of the age trains such traitorous disciples, and how he teaches such an exceptional sword prodigy. I dare not. Yan Rong lowered his voice again. Stand up when you speak. Yan Rong trembled slightly upon hearing this. According to his usual manner of conduct, he should have been severely punished. Why the sudden change in style? He suddenly remembered the words of his 7th junior brother. Filled with all sorts of doubts, Lu Zhou then said, Bring me the sword. He raised his right hand, waiting for someone to hand over a sword. Those nearby exchanged glances. Among those present, only Zhou Jifeng was a master of the sword. If you can't even show this bit of perception, then you've truly wasted your time at Evil Sky Pavilion. Zhou Jifeng hurriedly drew his own sword and handed it over, placing it in Lu Zhou's palm. Lu Zhou picked up the sword, the sunlight glinting off the blade. Since you call me master, I shall act in the capacity of a master and see what progress you have made. Yan Rong showed a surprised expression, hesitating to take the longevity sword. Seeing him not move, Lu Zhou uttered a sharp cry and thrust forward. Not using primal energy, the sword moved fluidly, like a roaming dragon. Perhaps because the sword's material was not the best, it visibly wobbled during use. But it was this wobbling that made the sword movements intricate and unpredictable. Yan Rong's expression became solemn. He could easily defeat anyone, but he dared not underestimate his master. As the thrust came, he immediately recognized this move was from the returning to the origin sword technique. This was the sword technique he was most proficient in. Yan Rong drew the longevity sword and swung it. When a heavenly tier weapon meets weapons of other tiers, the outcome is always the same. Lu Zhou's sword swayed up and down, dodging the longevity sword at an odd angle. With a loosening grip, whoosh, he cut off a lock of Yan Rong's hair, finally pinning it to the wall behind him, less than half an inch from his neck. Just one move, and he was defeated, all within the span of a few breaths. The gap was unimaginable. Yan Rong found it hard to accept, clenching the longevity sword so tightly his knuckles turned white. To be defeated in swordsmanship was to shatter all his pride. Nothing could be simpler and more effective than this. This was the outcome Lu Zhou wanted. In terms of experience, the Pavilion Lord clearly came out on top. In terms of skill, it seemed the Pavilion Lord was stronger too. The gentleman relies too much on the longevity sword, thinking it would cut through that weapon. Unfortunately, he was wrong. Not only that, combat requires breaking the norm. A sword is not just a sword. When appropriate, it can be a knife, or even a hidden weapon. The Pavilion Lord threw the sword, exactly like using a hidden weapon. The problem is, most cultivators rely on primal energy to manipulate weapons, so they hardly ever encounter a situation situation like this. Yu Shangrong's combat experience is indeed rich. He even has plenty of life and death experience, but he lacks this kind of fighting experience. Losing is within reason. His loss is perfectly reasonable. Lu Zhou won with a single sword strike, hands behind his back. Is this your way of the sword? Yu Shangrong was speechless. He felt that the last strike was full of flaws. He had hundreds, thousands of ways to counter, yet he chose the most foolish one. He knew he would lose, but he did not expect to lose so easily. The master, though aged, used an ordinary weapon to defeat him wielding the longevity sword. Isn't this more than just a notch above in skill? Shu Honghong started excitedly flattering. Master's divine might is unparalleled. His swordsmanship is #1 for thousands of generations.